The first time I saw it, I knew I was home. It wasn't the quaint, overpriced beachfront bungalow that did it for me. It wasn't the whisper of the waves on the shore, or the palm trees doing their sultry, breezy dance against the painfully blue Florida sky. No, it was the tower. Perched at the edge of my new property like a forgotten sentinel, it was a glorious relic of a bygone era. A 1970s lifeguard tower, 20 feet tall, made of wood bleached gray by decades of sun and salt. It was peeling, graffiti-tagged with the artistic stylings of what I could only assume were stoned teenagers from the Bush administration, and probably home to a family of very territorial seagulls. To the casual observer, it was an eyesore, a lawsuit waiting to happen. To me, it was the Statue of Liberty. For 10 years, I had lived in a state of beige. Beige cubicle, beige condominium, beige Toyota Camry. My job as a mid-level software engineer involved attending meetings about synergy and optimizing user engagement funnels, which is corporate speak for finding new and innovative ways to annoy people into clicking on things they don't need. I was slowly dying under the fluorescent lights. The highlight of my week was Crazy Sock Friday, a mandatory fun event that felt less like a celebration of individuality and more like a cry for help from a workforce on the brink. Then, a miracle happened. The dinky startup I'd joined a decade ago for some worthless stock options got bought by a tech giant. My worthless options were suddenly worth a small fortune. I didn't hesitate. I submitted my resignation with a 2-word email. The second word was you, cashed out, and fled south until the air smelled of salt and freedom. This bungalow and its magnificent, dilapidated tower was my escape. It was my fortress of solitude, my post-corporate clubhouse, my magnum opus. I wasn't just going to fix it up. I was going to turn it into the ultimate hangout spot. A top-floor office with a 360-degree view of the ocean, a mini fridge stocked with beer, and absolutely, positively no meetings about synergy. I was standing on my new patch of sandy heaven, staring up at my beautiful, derelict masterpiece with the adoration of a new father, when a shadow fell over me. It was the kind of sharp, precise shadow that could only be cast by a person with a spine made of rebar and a ruler. "Welcome to Paradise Palms." I turned. A woman in her mid-50s stood there, dressed in a crisp pastel pink tennis skirt and a matching visor. She held a clipboard against her chest like a riot shield. Her smile was a perfect, white, terrifying crescent. "I'm Brenda," she said, though the tone suggested she should have been announced by a herald with a trumpet. "Community president." "Alex?" I said, trying to radiate friendly, non-threatening new neighbor vibes. "Nice to meet you. Thanks for the welcome basket, by the way. The pineapple was a nice touch. A little on the nose for Florida, but nice." Brenda did not acknowledge the joke. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were fixed on my tower. "I trust you've also received your copy of the community guidelines." She hefted the clipboard, which I now saw was attached to a thick, spiral-bound book, the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the HOA Bible. "Got it," I said. "Haven't had a chance to read it cover to cover yet. I assume there's a test later?" Her smile tightened by a millimeter. "Then you'll know that Section 4, Subsection C, Paragraph 12, explicitly forbids non-conforming detached structures, which—" She paused, letting the words hang in the humid air. "Is what I'd classify that as." She pointed a perfectly manicured coral pink fingernail at my beautiful tower. I felt a primal surge of defiance. This woman, this pastel-clad tyrant, was not going to take my dream away from me. "Oh, this?" I said, patting one of the tower's weathered support beams as if it were a loyal old dog. "This isn't a non-conforming detached structure. It's a historically significant maritime observation post. It's grandfathered in. Came with the property deed, clear as day. I was, of course, pulling this directly out of my backside. But I said it with the unearned confidence of a man who just quit a job he hated. Brenda's terrifying smile didn't falter. "We'll see about that," she chirped, before pivoting on her pristine white tennis shoes and marching back toward her identical HOA-approved bungalow. The war had begun. 2 days later, the first salvo arrived. It was a letter on thick, cream-colored cardstock embossed with the Paradise Palms HOA logo. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese. The tower was cited for violation of aesthetic standards, Section 7, subsection A. The peeling paint was not within the pre-approved color palette of seafoam Psy, sandy beige, or gentle coral. Structural instability, Section 9, subsection D. It was deemed a potential safety hazard to the community, despite being located entirely on my property, a good 50 yards from anyone else. General nuisance, Section 2, subsection F. Its mere existence was detrimental to the tranquil and harmonious atmosphere of Paradise Palms. I was given 30 days to have the structure professionally and completely removed. Failure to comply would result in daily fines, a lien on my property, and, I quote, further corrective actions. I could almost hear Brenda's gleeful cackle echoing from the embossed logo. I immediately called my best friend Dave. He was still trapped in the beige life, a fellow software engineer who thought my escape was equal parts inspiring and insane. "Dude, just tear it down," he said, his voice tinny through the phone. "It's not worth the fight. You know what these HOA people are like. They're bored, they have unlimited power, and their only source of joy is making other people miserable." "Tear it down? Dave, you don't understand," I said, pacing back and forth on my new deck. I looked at the tower, then at Brenda's house. I could see her through the window, watering a perfectly manicured orchid. This is a matter of principle. They drew first blood. She wants it gone because it's old and has character. It doesn't fit her sterile, cookie-cutter vision of paradise. I'm not just going to restore this tower now. I'm going to turn it into a monument to spite that she'll have to see every single morning when she sips her imported, fair-trade, single-origin coffee. "You're insane," Dave said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "So what's the plan?" "The plan," I said, a grin spreading across my face, "is malicious compliance." That night, fueled by righteous indignation and 3 cups of coffee, I became a legal scholar. I scoured the city ordinances, the county property codes, and yes, the HOA Bible itself. Brenda had made a critical mistake. She had focused on aesthetics. I focused on function. And deep within the city's zoning regulations, I found it, my holy grail. A clause that protected pre-existing structures from being forcibly removed during renovation, so long as the original footprint and primary function were maintained. I read the original 1972 property survey. The tower wasn't listed as a structure. It was listed as a coastal observation and emergency access point. Its function wasn't to look pretty. It was, officially, for emergency observation and rapid water deployment. That phrase became my mantra, my shield, my sword. Brenda wanted a war? She was about to get one. By the book. Finding a contractor who was willing to wade into an active HOA war zone was easier than I expected. I just had to find one who hated HOAs as much as I did. Enter Sal. Sal was a semi-retired, 60-something contractor with a leathery tan, a gravelly voice, and a look in his eye that said he'd seen and built it all. When I laid out the situation, he didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, a deep, appreciative rumble in his chest. "So let me get this straight," he said, leaning against his dusty Ford F-150 and looking from me to the tower. "You want to restore this beautiful old relic to code, with all the proper permits, knowing full well that the Wicked Witch of the West End is going to throw holy water on you every step of the way?" "That's the plan," I confirmed. "But we do it by the book. Her book, my book, the city's book. Every permit pulled, every inspection passed. We are going to be so unimpeachably compliant it makes her teeth hurt." Sal broke into a wide, gap-toothed grin. "Kid, I like your style. I'm in." The first day of work was glorious. Sal's crew rolled up at 8 a.m. sharp. The air filled with the sounds of progress. Generators humming, saws buzzing, men yelling. It was the anthem of construction, and to me it was Vivaldi. It took Brenda exactly 7 minutes to appear. She marched onto the edge of my property, phone held aloft, filming Sal's truck. "This is a commercial vehicle," she declared. "Parking for more than 1 hour is a violation of Section 11. Sal, who was coordinating the placement of a lumber delivery, didn't even turn around. "It's an active loading zone, ma'am. City permit," he grunted. Brenda's face twitched. She changed tactics. "I'll need to see your contractor's license, and your insurance, and all relevant city permits for this project." Sal finally turned, wiping his hands on his jeans. He walked over to her, pulled a thick, plastic-sleeved folder from his truck, and handed it to her. "It's all in there. Knock yourself out." He then turned back to his crew. "All right, boys, let's get that porta-potty set up. Right over there." He pointed to a spot on my property that had a clear, direct, and completely unobstructed view of Brenda's front picture window. I had to physically restrain myself from hugging him. The first official complaint was for the noise. The second was for the unsightly portable toilet. The third was for debris, which consisted of a single sawdust pile that Sal's crew meticulously swept up at the end of each day. Each complaint was delivered via formal letter, and each was countered by me with a polite, referenced email citing the city work hour ordinances and my collection of permits. For 2 weeks, the work continued. The old, rotting wood was replaced. The structure was reinforced. New windows, designed to withstand hurricane-force winds, were installed. The tower was slowly being reborn, stronger and more defiant than ever. And with every nail hammered, Brenda's rage grew. She would stand on her lawn, arms crossed, just watching. Her sheer force of will was almost impressive. Then she escalated. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Sal and his guys were using a pneumatic nail gun to install the new siding. It was loud, sure, but it was the sound of progress. Apparently, to Brenda, it was the sound of Armageddon. I was inside making a pitcher of lemonade for the crew when I saw the flashing lights. 2 police cruisers were pulling up in front of my house. Brenda was already out there, talking to the officers with animated, frantic gestures. I took a deep breath, grabbed the folder Sal had given me, which I had lovingly updated with every new inspection report, and walked outside. There were 2 cops. One was older, with a thick mustache, and a world-weary sigh permanently etched on his face. This was Officer Miller. The other was young, eager, and looked like he was taking this all very, very seriously. Officer Ramirez. "So," Officer Miller began, turning his tired gaze from Brenda to me. "She said you were building some kind of illegal watchtower?" "Good afternoon, officers," I said calmly, handing him the folder. "It's a maritime observation post, officer. Pre-existing structure, fully permitted restoration. It's all in there. City permits, county approvals, structural engineering reports, even a copy of the original 1972 survey highlighting its function." Officer Ramirez took the folder and began flipping through it, his eyes widening slightly with each page. He was clearly impressed by my organizational skills. "Ma'am," Ramirez said, turning to Brenda, "he has the paperwork. Everything appears to be in order. There's nothing illegal happening here." Brenda's face went from pale to crimson. "He's disrupting the peace!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "The tranquility of our community is shattered. It's constant. The noise, the men, the blue toilet!" Officer Miller let out a long, slow breath. He looked at the nail gun, which had fallen silent. He looked at the sun, high in the afternoon sky. He looked back at Brenda. "Ma'am, it's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. His contractor is using a hammer. That's not a disturbance. That's called daytime. Please don't call 911 again unless an actual crime is being committed." The dismissal was brutal. It was beautiful. The cops got back in their cars and drove away. I looked at Brenda, who was standing there, utterly defeated. I gave her a small, polite, cheerful wave. The look she gave me in return could have curdled milk from a mile away. I knew then that she wouldn't be beaten by permits or ordinances. She knew the law was, infuriatingly, on my side. She'd have to get more creative, and so would I. My entire defense rested on the phrase emergency observation and rapid water deployment. The observation part was covered. The tower was now a state-of-the-art observation post, but rapid water deployment. That felt like a vulnerability, a loophole she could exploit. I had to close it. That weekend, I fell down a rabbit hole of government auction websites. Police impounds, military surplus, municipal liquidations. I was looking for something, anything, that could be classified as a rapid water deployment vehicle. A small inflatable raft, too flimsy. A canoe, too slow. And then I saw it. Listed under Municipal Seizures, County Paramedic Services. It was a 2008 model jet ski. But it wasn't just any jet ski. It was bright, unapologetic, emergency vehicle red. On the side, in bold white lettering, were the words paramedic. It came with specialized compartments for holding first aid supplies and a mounting point for a small stretcher. It was decommissioned, sold as is, and currently located in a dusty impound lot 3 counties over. It was perfect. I entered the online auction. My only competition was a guy named Scrapmaster74. We went back and forth for an hour, but my corporate stockpile war chest was deeper than his. I won the auction for the grand total of $1,250. I spent the next week bringing it back to life. I hauled it back to my place on a rented trailer, much to the horror of my neighbors. I cleaned the carburetors, replaced the spark plugs, and gave it a fresh battery. The 2-stroke engine was a snarling, obnoxious beast, and the first time I got it to turn over, it roared to life with a cloud of blue smoke that I was sure violated at least 17 of Brenda's sacred HOA bylaws. I took it out for a spin. It was loud, it was fast, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned, next to the tower itself. It was the key to my final move. It was essential equipment. It was my secret weapon. By the end of the month, the tower was done. And it was glorious. Sal and his team had outdone themselves. It stood tall and proud, a beacon of defiance on my little stretch of beach. The new siding was painted a vibrant shade of seafoam green, a color I'd found in the HOA's own approved palette, though I'd deliberately chosen the most obnoxious, eye-watering version of it. The new hurricane-proof windows gleamed. A sleek solar panel on the roof powered a small fridge, a coffee maker, and a Bluetooth speaker. It was perfect. There was only one thing left. The final piece of the puzzle. The stairway. I had commissioned a custom-built, black, powder-coated aluminum spiral staircase. It was elegant, modern, and the absolute last thing Brenda would want to see attached to my tower. It was the final step to full, glorious usability. The day it was scheduled for installation, I felt a buzz of excitement. This was it, the finish line. Sal's crew arrived with the massive, coiled structure on a flatbed truck. Brenda must have had a sixth sense for when my victory was imminent. As the crew began to unstrap the staircase, her garage door slid open. Her golf cart, the official vehicle of petty tyrants everywhere, whined out onto the street. But she didn't just watch from her lawn this time. In a move of stunning, brazen audacity, she drove her golf cart right off the pavement, across the small strip of grass, and onto my property. She parked it directly at the base of the tower, in the exact spot where the concrete pad for the staircase was meant to be poured. Then she killed the engine, got out, unfolded a lawn chair, pulled a thermos and a book from her basket, and sat down. A one-woman blockade. I stormed out of my house with Sal right behind me. "Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "you are on my private property, and you are preventing a licensed contractor from performing his legally permitted work. You need to move, right now." She looked up from her book, a romance novel with a Fabio-esque man on the cover, and gave me a smile of pure, venomous triumph. "I'm not moving," she said sweetly. "This installation was not approved by the Architectural Review Committee. I'm afraid I can't allow it. And you can't use your precious tower if you can't get into it. Checkmate?" I turned to Sal, my mind racing. Can we just work around her?" Sal shook his head, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the sand. "Kid, I can't. My guys can't get near her or the cart. Insurance liability. We touch her, we're screwed. We can call the cops, but you know that'll take hours, and by the time they get her to move, we'll have lost the day. She knows that." He kicked at the sand in frustration. "She's got us." I stood there, defeated. She had found a way. A simple, non-violent, incredibly effective way to stop me. She was a genius. An evil, pastel-wearing genius. I looked at the beautiful, finished tower, so close and yet so inaccessible. I looked at Sal and his disappointed crew. I looked at Brenda, smugly sipping whatever was in her thermos, basking in her victory. And then I looked at the ocean, and past the ocean I looked at my boat lift. And on my boat lift, gleaming in the morning sun, was my bright red, white-lettered paramedic jet ski. The gears in my head didn't just turn. They ground together with the screech of tortured metal, throwing off a beautiful, terrible, magnificent spark of an idea. A slow grin spread across my face. "Sal," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "how much clearance is there on the main deck of the tower?" Sal looked at me, confused. About 12 feet wide, 10 feet deep. Solid 2-inch planking over reinforced joists. Why?" "No reason," I said, turning away from him. "Just keep your crew here. Don't let them leave. The show's about to start." I walked away from the scene of the standoff, leaving them all confused. I could feel Brenda's eyes on my back, certain of her victory. I didn't walk towards my house. I walked towards the jet ski lift. The process was a ceremony. I put on a faded life vest. I found the most ridiculous pair of reflective sunglasses I owned. I did a few stretches, like an Olympic athlete preparing for a gold medal run. I lowered the jet ski into the water. With a turn of the key, the 2-stroke engine screamed to life. It was a glorious, unapologetic, neighborhood tranquility-shattering roar. I didn't just head out. I made a show of it. I carved a wide, sweeping arc out into the surf, the engine whining at high RPMs. I could see neighbors starting to emerge onto their balconies, drawn by the commotion. I looked back at the shore. Brenda was now standing, her hands on her hips, watching me with a mixture of annoyance and confusion. Sal and his crew had stopped what they were doing and were just staring. This was it. Showtime. I turned the jet ski back toward the shore. I saw the perfect wave forming, a nice, clean swell about 3 feet high, rolling steadily towards the beach. It was my ramp. I gunned the engine. The world dissolved into a blur of speed and spray. The roar of the engine was deafening. I fixed my eyes on the upper deck of the tower, my landing zone. The beach rushed toward me. I saw Brenda's look of confusion finally morph into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror as she realized what was about to happen. I hit the wave perfectly. For a brief, glorious, impossible moment, I was flying. The jet ski, all 700 pounds of it, was airborne. I soared over the sand, over Brenda's stupid golf cart, over her gaping mouth. Then, with a deafening, earth-shaking thump, I landed. The jet ski slammed onto the deck of the lifeguard tower, the reinforced structure groaning but holding firm. A tidal wave of displaced water from the jet ski's hull cascaded over the railing, drenching a sputtering, speechless Brenda below. Silence. The engine had stalled on impact. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves and the drip, drip, drip of water falling from the deck onto Brenda's head. I stood up slowly, striking a heroic pose on the seat of the jet ski. I looked down at my vanquished foe. She was soaked to the bone, her pastel outfit now a sad, clinging mess. Her book was floating in a puddle at her feet. I cleared my throat. "Stairs are for quitters, Brenda," I announced, my voice booming in the sudden quiet. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe my tower is now officially accessible for rapid water deployment. Welcome to Paradise Palms." For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. The entire neighborhood seemed to be holding its collective breath. Brenda stood frozen, water dripping from her visor, her mouth opening and closing like a beached fish. Then, one of Sal's younger crew members, a kid named Marco, let out a single explosive snort. That broke the dam. The rest of the crew erupted in howls of laughter. Sal himself was doubled over, one hand on his knee, his face red, shaking with silent, wheezing guffaws. Even a few of the neighbors on their balconies started clapping. Brenda finally snapped out of her trance. She let out a shriek that scared a nearby flock of sandpipers into the air and started sputtering a string of incoherent threats involving lawyers, the city council, and possibly The Hague. But the spell was broken. Her power, which was always built on a foundation of intimidation and bluff, had been washed away in a torrent of salt water and two-stroke engine exhaust. A new character entered the scene. Mr. Henderson from 2 doors down, a kindly retiree who I knew spent most of his days documenting local bird species. He was standing on his lawn, phone held high. He hadn't been watching birds. He had filmed the entire thing. "Got it!" he called out, giving me a thumbs up. "Sending it to the community Facebook group now. I'm titling it Jet Ski 1 HOA 0. Brenda's face went white. The public humiliation was a far greater blow than the drenching. Of course, the cops came. This time there were enough 911 calls about a jet ski airplane and a madman on the beach that they sent 2 cars again. Officer Miller and Officer Ramirez arrived to a surreal scene. Me, standing proudly on a jet ski parked on a lifeguard tower deck. My contractors crying with laughter, and a soaking wet, shivering Brenda pointing a trembling finger at me. Officer Miller took it all in. He looked at the tower. He looked at the jet ski. He looked at Brenda. He looked back at me. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired. Incredibly, profoundly tired. Ramirez, ever the professional, was already scrolling through his phone. "Sir," he said, holding it up for Miller to see. "The video is already online. It's got over 100 views." Miller watched the short clip of my glorious flight. A strange sound escaped his lips, a choked cough that sounded suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. He shook his head slowly, the corner of his mustache twitching. He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "technically parking your personal vehicle on private property with the express purpose of blocking a legally permitted construction project could be considered trespassing. And technically, this man just moved his own personal property from one part of his land to another. It was unorthodox. But I don't see a crime here. He paused. Maybe you should just go home, and perhaps take a hot shower. They left without writing a single ticket. Brenda, defeated and shivering, finally got into her golf cart and squelched away. Sal and his crew, having regained some semblance of composure, got the concrete pad poured and the magnificent spiral staircase installed in record time. Getting the jet ski down was a problem for another day. For the rest of the afternoon, it remained on the deck, a monument to my victory. The fallout was swift and brutal. The video went viral within our small community. The HOA held an emergency board meeting that very night. Faced with a vote of no confidence, a brewing rebellion among the homeowners, and the very real threat of Mr. Henderson sending his video to the local news affiliate, Brenda quietly tendered her resignation, effective immediately. The new HOA president was a guy named Jeff, a chill, semi-retired surfer who lived at the end of the block. His first official act was to motion to abolish the pre-approved paint palette. The motion passed unanimously. He came by the next day to introduce himself. "Dude," he said, looking up at the tower, "that was righteous, absolutely righteous." Months later, the war is a distant, hilarious memory. The tower is my sanctuary. The jet ski, my glorious chariot of vengeance, is parked on its lift below, polished and maintained as a trophy of war. My best friend Dave finally flew down to see my new life for himself. We're sitting on the tower deck, feet up on the railing, drinking cold beers and watching the sun melt into the Gulf of Mexico. The spiral staircase, solid and beautiful, feels incredibly satisfying to walk up and down. "I still can't believe you landed a jet ski up here," Dave says, shaking his head in disbelief for the 10th time. I take a long sip of my beer and look out at the peaceful, endless ocean. The air is warm, the breeze is gentle, and for the first time in my adult life, I feel completely and utterly free. "What can I say?" I reply, a smile tugging at my lips. "Some people see an obstacle. I see an opportunity to create an alternative entry point consistent with the structure's primary function." And in my own little slice of absurd, hard-won paradise, it made all the sense in the world.